So, Glenn, the big story out of last week was CrowdStrike and the disruption it caused. I read somewhere it's a quantitative up to $5.5 billion for Fortune 500 companies. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a wee bit. Um, I
That's a
think
bit of
I
money.
I think it'll probably come out to more than that, all considered.
Oh yeah,
Based on the fallout here and everything that's kind of happened and been disrupted in all of this since. Um, so for those folks not familiar, which I'm sure you've heard about at least at this point, but there's a security company called CrowdStrike that released an update that was kind of faulty, and it caused some blue screen issues on Windows machines. Mac and Linux were not affected, but we got a little bit of a taste as to what sort of systems we have in our world out there that have Windows and we're running CrowdStrike. So
Microsoft really kind of took it in the shorts there at the beginning of it. Everybody was blaming Microsoft for all the blue screens and thought it was a Microsoft problem, and here it turned out to be a CrowdStrike problem.
yeah,
Uh,
indeed.
Now, Glenn, when something like that happens, it's not really a security problem. It's not really a breach or anything like that, but it's quite impactful as we've seen with the dollar amounts. Uh, does that sour you on, that company or companies like it?
Um, No, and just to go back to your first comment for a second there, in security we have this CIA triad, this confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So this impacted that availability part of it. And I think there was a lot of argument in the security community whether this was a security incident per se or not, or just an outage, some sort of hit to availability. Like, well, I don't care that much about applying those sort of definitions to it. This wasn't a confidentiality and integrity issue, but it was obviously pretty widespread. Um, I think I guess I can give a few examples of things that we saw out there too. I mean, in the infrastructure out there, airports, airlines, flights were delayed. That was probably the most noticeable to folks there. But it trickled down into things like I had to get an emissions test on my car to register it, and they could do the emissions test, but they couldn't register it at the site we went to because of this issue.
Right,
So, I mean, issues large and small. So,
right.
yeah.
And, you know, even though we practice a lot of times, I mean, I don't know about you, but the last, you know, quite a few last tabletops I've done have been around ransomware and hacking and everything like that. But I mean, this just goes to show you that anything can happen, and you really need to have that plan, that BCP plan, right? Business
Yeah.
continuity plan in place, so you can follow that, and situationally it doesn't necessarily need, or well, the issue is not necessarily going to be what we practice, but uh, it's still important to have that plan in place.
Yeah, and I come back to the planning is the important part. The plans are useless. The planning is indispensable. Was that an Eisenhower quote?
Yeah, somebody
Um,
said that.
and I think that's it right there. I mean, it's about training and getting used to working with your team and leading your team when there's some sort of crisis or high stress situation going on. And I mean, if you don't train it, you aren't ready for it. You you really do like fall to the level of your training. You don't rise to the occasion. And somebody else smarter than me said that to begin with. But yeah, I think that really is the case. It also occurs to me I didn't really answer your other question before, and the this doesn't really sour me on CrowdStrike. I mean, CrowdStrike messed up, but so have a lot of other folks, a lot of other organizations out there. This just happened to be larger and larger scale than the usual sort, I guess. But I think at the end of the day, like we're looking for CrowdStrike and companies like it to provide quick intelligence, quick updates. We want it to detect badness in one of its sensors over here, and then deploy knowledge of that to the other billion. And we wanted to do that quickly. So, like, are we willing to give that up for the risk of having an outage like this? And I'm not. I mean, I'm not willing to change that model just based on something like this. I mean, it
Right.
does show that we have a heavy reliance on technology infrastructure here, and I think it's done good to highlight that. But I don't know that I'd change the model here.
I would agree with that. The implications of not having something like that in place are much scarier than having something like that in place and them having an issue. I was fortunate enough to sit in on a call early on, during this problem with the Crowdstrike CEO and CTO, and they, I'll give them this. They really had a good communication plan when it came to, them reacting to this. They took ownership of it. They didn't try to blame anyone else. They didn't try to, push it off on customers who didn't update right or anything like that. They didn't push it off on Microsoft. They took ownership. They came out and they explained what happened, and they explained what they were going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And to me, that means a lot. We've seen some incidents in the past where communication just goes dark for days at a time, and then it becomes a finger pointing exercise. And to me, I respect this side of it much more.
Yeah, I'd have to agree there. And that, I mean, that gives me more confidence in the organization too, if the leadership is willing to own the problem and own the solution. If there's finger pointing and blame, I mean, what are you really going to get out of that? Are you really going to get a full-fledged solution, or are you going to get lip service to that? And you don't know, right? So, like, I prefer the ownership and at least coming out and taking the blame for it and taking the responsibility for it. So,
well, any final thoughts, Glenn?
Nah, just that this was fun for a lot of IT people and a lot of security people. A lot of fun, a lot of air quote fun.
Air quote fun. Just when you thought your weekend was going to be okay.
Yeah, and then the rug is pulled out from under you.
Yep. So. Yep. Well, thanks, Glenn, and thanks everyone for joining us for this short, abridged discussion about a timely incident. And we'll see you next time.